Hello, and welcome to a video that deals with a sporting genre that's been distinctly absent from this generation of video games, which is that of professional boxing. Now, EA Sport, who developed the flagship Fight Night brand of boxing games, haven't released one since 2011, the last installment being Fight Night Champion for the PlayStation 3. Now, I love the sport of boxing, and I think it's probably the only sport I follow on a daily basis. I grew up with my dad's generation of boxers, and my indoctrination to the sport was re-watching these old VHS tapes of, Marvin Hagler, Tommy Hearns, Roberto Duran, and Sugar Ray Leonard. But when it comes to video games, my introduction to the boxing genre was a very crudely made Japanese title called Victory Boxing, which was released back in 1996 for the PlayStation 1. Now, this was a hilarious and quite unique look at the sport of boxing, but was surprisingly solid in terms of gameplay, despite the blocky 32-bit graphics. And this later evolved, of course, into the Knockout King series by EA Sport and the later Fight Night series, which was then which superseded Knockout Kings. But since then, and looking at this apparent decline in popularity of the boxing game franchise, I can sort of understand how it happened, and I attribute it to two key factors, which stem both from EA Sports and their desire to make a good return on their product, basically. First and foremost, and what has been worrying quite a few people in the boxing industry for a few years now, is the rise and growing popularization of MMA combat sports, and in particular the UFC, which has gone on, it's grown from this seemingly fringe combat sport industry to one that's overtaken boxing in quite a few areas. And with particular regard to video games, we've seen a lot of product pushed out by EA Sports and THQ that are to do with UFC rather than boxing these days. And even as someone who, besides watching a bit of K1, I don't really follow any other combat sport besides boxing. Even I know the name, Anderson Silva and Conor McGregor. Such is the growing brand awareness and immersion into popular consciousness of UFC into the Western world now, which was a position that was formerly held by pro boxing. So I think this growing interest in UFC is one of the reasons attributable to the decline in boxing support, and by extension, the reason EA are kind of reluctant to push out a new boxing game. But of course, that is not the only reason, and I think the second reason is that to maximise the sale potential of a video game, EA are going to want returns. They're going to want returns not just from the hardcore boxing fan base, but also the casual boxing fan and general public too. And what this requires is public awareness of the state of boxing and a general enthusiasm towards it. In the same way that, anyone on the street will know the name Conor McGregor now, they need an equivalent star in the world of boxing. And on this note, you would be correct in saying that nearly everyone, a boxing fan or not, who's attuned to the news and sports in general, will know the name Floyd Mayweather Jr. And it's true that since the last Fight Night game back in 2011, Mayweather's career has peaked and concluded with an unbeaten record, and he's since become a household name. But I think the problem here is that the general consensus and public interest has traditionally always sat with the heavyweight division of boxing, and Mayweather Jr., of course, spent his career at welterweight and middleweight, or light middleweight. So, indeed, if you look at any given Knockout Kings or Fight Night game packaging, 9 times out of 10 it will feature a heavyweight boxer, such as Muhammad Ali or Lennox Lewis. And it shows that EA Sport subscribe to this idea that they need to hang the game and hinge it around the heavyweight division, as this generally holds more interest than other divisions. And, looking at this and turning to the heavyweight boxing division throughout the 2000s, we see the second reason I feel another game has not been sanctioned yet. And the reason is that the heavyweight division at this time has generally been considered quite boring, and it's been dominated by the Ukrainian brothers Vitaly and Vladimir Klitschko. And between them, these guys held the 5 heavyweight belts available for a number of years, and Vladimir held his for almost a decade until he was beaten by Tyson Fury in 2015. And, I'm not disrespecting these guys, and I'm not saying they're incapable boxers, because far from it. These are extremely capable fighters. But the one-sidedness of the division, combined with what many consider to be the lack of personality in these two brothers, made it virtually impossible to make them poster boys for, the wider sport of boxing and to try and, craft a AAA game. So fast forward to today, and back to my assertion of why it's time to see another boxing game come out of EA or an equivalent developer, is I feel we have basically seen a reinvigoration of the boxing industry and a passing of the torch to a new generation of hungry young fighters and great new personalities. And this transition came in perhaps the starkest and most symbolic way with Klitschko's knockout defeat at the hands of Anthony Joshua last year. And this was seen by many as a turning point to a more exciting time in boxing. And to his credit, while Vladimir has been considered a boring 1-2 puncher for much of his career in the past, this was probably the best I've ever seen him fight, and he performed fantastically in the ring. And most famously as well, which again generates this kind of atmosphere and this interest and enthusiasm towards boxing, was that he managed to drop Joshua in the 6th round, which is the first time that this guy's ever been knocked down in his career. So this excitement injected into the heavyweight division persists through the personality of Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte and Tyson Fury in the UK, who are probably his closest competitors, and also wider international contenders such as Deontay Wilder and Jarrell Miller in the USA, and Joseph Parker, who's currently quite popular, coming out of New Zealand. But most importantly, and why I think, again, further reason why we should be seeing another Fight Night game soon, or a new title, depending on what EA choose to do, is that the heavyweight division in current boxing is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to potential marketing for a new video game. The middleweight division, for example, sees knockout artists such as Gennady Golovkin and Saul Alvarez vying for dominance with these exciting fights they're going through that rarely go the distance, such as their kind of capability to knock people out. And, within this division still, we have people like the American Daniel Jacobs, Billy Joe Saunders from the UK, and the Japanese Olympian Ryota Murata. And these emerging personalities are kind of coming up to meet them with really kind of exciting fights. And once more at the lighter weights as well, we have Vasyl Lomachenko and Rigondeaux and Josh Kelly from the UK, who are emerging as favourites for their fantastic, evasive manoeuvres and superior ring craft. So combining all of this together, 2018 looks like a great time for, UK boxing, but also world boxing as well. And, there's a lot of traction being built towards the sport, and it's sort of mustering a new crowd, I think. I mean, a lot of my friends that aren't actually into boxing are able to kind of have these conversations with me now, such is their knowledge of these kind of emerging fighters. And by extension, one would hope that this growing enthusiasm towards the sport, it will be enough to sanction and reinvigorate the game industry with another Fight Night. So I wouldn't say this is a rant that I'm having, although I am a bit put out that it's been so long since we've seen a boxing game on the PlayStation or Xbox. But it's merely an observation directed at the current state of boxing, the growing enthusiasm towards it, and the fact that it's been a good few years since we've actually seen a boxing game come out of the industry.